Hi, this is Tamara from mooglyblog.com, and in this video, I'm going to be demonstrating how to crochet the Easy Rectangle Log Cabin Blanket, which is a free pattern you'll find on mooglyblog.com. Please go to the link in the description where you will find a link to both the right and left-handed video tutorials, as well as the written patterns you can follow along with this video, and all the supplies you need. To make this blanket, I used Bernat Blanket O'Go in 2 different colorways, copper coins and fired clay. I used 2 skeins of each to make the size I made, but you can add more yarn for a bigger blanket or use a little bit less for a smaller one. This is a very adaptable pattern and it's really up to you. You'll also, of course, need a crochet hook. This one is a USN 10mm by Susan Bates. And again, I've linked both the hook and the yarn at the link in the description. This is, as I say, a very simple pattern. It is an easy pattern to crochet. It's great for beginners. It's all double crochets. So let's take a closer look at how the Easy Rectangle Log Cabin Blanket comes together. Now, a lot of times when you go to make a crochet log cabin blanket, you'll get a square. And I do have a pattern for that on Moogly Blog too. But I've had a lot of requests for a rectangle, and making a rectangle log cabin takes a little bit more thought. Right here, you can see the very beginning of the blanket. Again, you can see it's all just simply double crochets. The stitching itself is quite simple, but the key is to start with this long rectangle. This dark brown rectangle was the very first one I made. And then when I added section 2, I worked off the end of that rectangle. And then section 3 worked across both of those. Basically, what you want to do is you want to avoid accidentally squaring it up. If we had started with a square rather than a long rectangle, and then added another square to that, and then worked across, we would have had a square. We would have been squaring it up and making a square blanket. So the key is really to create basically that 3-to-1, sort of 1, 2, 3 sections, if you will, before you go across the top so you can maintain that rectangle shape. So as I made the blanket, it was 1, 2, section 3, then section 4 would be over here in the orange, working across these 2 ends. Then move it around here on the table a little bit. It's getting big. Section 5 comes back and works across the end of 4 and across the bottom of 1 and then 2. And then 6, we take off across the end of that one and work our way up there. 7, all the way around. So let's take a look, a little bit easier to see in the printed out layout included with the written pattern. So here is one of 2 layouts that I've included with the written pattern. And this one includes the colors that I actually used from the Bernat Blanket O'Gos that I used. But you can see how it comes here. We've got block 1 made with color A, block 2 made with color B, block 3 made with color C, block 4 made with color D, 5 with E, 6 with F, 7 with F, 8 with E, 9 with A, 10 with C, 11 with B, and 12 with D. Now, the reason I laid it out with these colors in this particular order is that I had 6 colors to use for my O'Gos, but I also needed to make sure that I'd have enough yarn from just 2 O'Gos of each to create this blanket. So I figured out how much yarn it took to make one of these little squares right here, which is a 7-inch by 7-inch square. And then I made sure I had the same number of squares in each of those colors. So for example, let's look at color A. You can see right there in the center, there were 2 squares of it, 1, 2. And then here for block 9, we did 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that was a total of 8 squares in that color. Now, if we look at another color, let's just grab another one here. We'll pick F. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Again, 8 squares of each color because that is how much yarn I had with the 2 O'Gos of each color. So if you want to change up the color layout, do take into mind you may need more yarn of a particular color if you use more of a particular color for a section than you do a different color. So that's something to think about. But I did include a blank one so you can play with that layout yourself right there. So I've still labeled the way I did, but if you want to try it with different colors, you can color in your own colors. You can ignore the A, B, C, D, E, F and, put in whatever colors you have if you want to do this as a stash buster, but this will let you play with it. And it also lets you continue expanding it if you want to, because if we look at how it comes together, you can see here's our 12th block. And if we wanted to add a 13, we would just keep going in that spiral that we've been making. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So 13 would be all the way across this end, 14 would be all the way across this end, 15 across here, and you can just keep building it out to make your blanket as big as you'd like. Alternately, of course, you can stop right in here around block 5 or 6 or 7, wherever you like the size to make a beautiful baby blanket or a specialty throw, whatever you would like. Just remember that each one of these blocks is essentially 7 inches by 7 inches, and that will help you build out your blanket to your own custom size. Also included in the written instructions, I've included this diagram to really show you which color I'm using for A, B, C, D, E, and F. And again, of course, if you want to pick your own colors of Ogos, you can substitute those in however you like. Just make sure once you break them apart, put them in a little bag or something so that they are labeled. You can keep those straight. After that, there are the written instructions for each block. They're all, again, going to be double crochet, and there's only 6 rows per block. That's how we keep that same measurements that our rectangle always works out. So if you want to play with that a little bit, you can absolutely do that and change the shape of your blanket, but the basic instructions are pretty simple. There are just a couple of fancy stitches that I use so that we get great edges, so that we don't need a border, but if you do want to add a border, you'll need to add more yarn. The first thing we need to do is open up our Bernat Blanket O'Go. So we simply remove the label and set it aside. And you can keep that with all the yarn information right there in the bottom if you'd like. Then we come down here to where the bottom of the yarns come together. You can see this is where they are separated and where our ends will live. There is this plastic fastener cord that we do need to remove. So you can see there's also a little tab to it there a little bit. There's a little bit of yarn fuzz stuck to it. We want to try and hold on to that a little bit as we cut if we can. It just makes it a lot easier to pull it on out. So just give that a snip and pull, and then we're ready to start stitching. You do want to try and pull from the outside of the skein. So if you need to kind of find your ends and figure out which one has the outside end, there it is right there, easy enough. And then you're ready to go ahead and start stitching. Now, if you'll recall from the diagram, I did start A, B, and C so that I could kind of work through the skein as I went without taking it apart until I absolutely had to. But if you do want to take it apart, again, just make sure that you label your A, B, and C so you don't get confused later when it's time to use those sections again. Now, as I mentioned, to make the blanket in the shown size, you'll need 2 of each of those colors. So if you use up one color of one skein making one section, you can go to that second skein of that same color and start using that section again. Of course, you could also just go with the flow and crochet right on through the skein as it lies. It's up to you. But for the best log cabin look, I'd recommend breaking each section into its respective colors. Now, as I've said a couple times here, this blanket is all double crochets, but I've thrown a few fancier versions of double crochets here in some important places that help us get started. The very first row, I used foundation double crochet, which I'll demonstrate here in a moment, and I do have a separate tutorial for. However, if you do not like using foundation double crochet, you could just as easily start with a chain of 26, skip the first 2 chains, and double crochet back into the remainder. The important thing is that at the end of row 1, you should have a total of 24 double crochets. So however you like to make those is totally fine. Here's how I did them. I'm going to start by putting a slip knot on my hook here, just as we do for most things that we make. And then for my first foundation double crochet, I'm going to chain 2, 1, 2, and then I am going to work into the underneath hump of that first chain I made. So not the back loop or front loop, but rather the underneath hump. If you like to work into a different portion of your chain, that's fine. It's whatever works for you. Then I'm going to yarn over. I'm going to go right into that chain, the very first one I made there. Then we yarn over and pull a loop through that chain. You can see we have 3 loops on the hook, and that very first one, the one we just made, that's going to be the chain at the bottom of our first double crochet. So to continue on, we yarn over and we pull through just that chain. Now we've got 3 loops on the hook, and we can finish our double crochet as usual. Yarn over and pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2. And now we've made our first foundation double crochet. That chain 2 at the beginning is just going to be a turning chain. We won't count it as a stitch. So to make the remainder of the foundation double crochets, we yarn over, go under the 2 loops that are now at the bottom of that first stitch we made. There we are. So just like going into a stitch, but now we're going into the bottom of the first stitch, or the previous stitch. Yarn over and pull up a loop, Now we have the chain at the bottom of our second stitch. Yarn over, pull through that loop, and now we can finish our double crochet. Yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2. So let's do that one more time. Yarn over, go under the 2 loops at the bottom of the previous stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop. Now we've got a chain for the bottom of this stitch, so we yarn over and pull through that loop, and now we can make our double crochet. Yarn over and pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2. So just continue that until you have a total of 24 double crochets. Now for the purposes of demonstration, I'm going to go ahead and stop here, but you should have 24 double crochets total. Then we're ready for rows 2 through 6, which are all the same. And basically, they're the same for all of the blocks that you're going to be doing for this pattern. We'll go ahead and turn, and we're going to start with a chainless starting double crochet. Now this is a stitch I chose because I like the look of it as the first stitch, and I also feel that gives a really nice edge that doesn't require a border or an edging, making it optional. So if you like to make your stitch this way, you can. Otherwise, you can chain 3 for a regular double crochet substitute, or use the double crochet substitute of your choice, whatever you like to do instead of a chain 3. So to make this one, the chainless starting double crochet, I'm going to pull my loop up to about the height of a double crochet stitch, secure it with my finger, yarn over with that loop itself, go right into that first stitch, yarn over with my working yarn, pull that loop up through the stitch, yarn over, pull through that stitch and behind the loop that I wound around my hook, and then I can finally release that top loop and yarn over and pull through 2. And that is my chainless starting double crochet. Again, if you'd prefer to chain 3 or chain 2 and double crochet or use a stacked double crochet, whatever you like to do, you can put it in that first stitch. After that, we simply double crochet in each stitch across. And as I say, we do that for a total of 6 rows. So we just need 6 rows of double crochet, 24 stitches in each row for block number 1. Then it will be time to join block number 2. So I'll see you when it's time to join that second block. So here I've finished off my first block. It's a lot narrower than yours should be. It should be 24 stitches long, but for the sake of demonstration today, I'm just stopping here. I've got 6 rows made though. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And all your blocks, no matter how wide, should be 6 rows tall. So after you have finished that last row, we're not going to turn to work back the other way. We're going to instead turn this way to work across the end of this block. Now, for the different blocks, you may need to join in different places, so check your instructions for that. But the important thing is really just to get the layout, not so much which side you join to, as long as you keep creating that spiral. So again, here, imagine there's a lot more stitches off this way. We've finished our block 1, but now we're just going to turn it this way so that we can join block 2 across the end. So to do that, we need to move to our next yarn color. So we're going to go ahead and separate our Ogo a little bit. I like to just give it a little bend in the opposite direction here, sort of open up that crescent before I pull these apart. And then you can literally just pull these right apart where the colors come together. You can see how one color kind of cones down into the next. And then with Bernat Blanket, they are tied together at the color chain, so you can simply give those a snip right there at the knot. I like to just go ahead and cut that right on out and set it aside. And then you can set aside the rest of that first color or whatever color you've just finished. Make sure you put it in a labeled bag or set it up however you need to so that you can come back and use this to make the next section where you'll be using this color. Then you're set to continue on with your next color. Okay, so now we've cut our yarn. We've got our first block. We're ready to join our second. So again, we want to turn that 90 degrees here, sort of just spin it so that we can join along that side. And what we're going to do is we're going to be working 2 double crochets in the side of each row. So that means we've got 6 rows. All our blocks will have 6 rows. Anytime we're working to the end of a block or the side of a block, we want to put 12 stitches. So we want to join with a double crochet. So I'm going to show you how to do that here. Again, if you prefer not to use this one, you can join with a slip stitch and then chain 3, or make whatever double crochet substitute you like to do for the first one. But here's how I did it. I'm going to hold on to the tail end of my yarn here in my hook hand using my non-hook fingers. So it's just sort of secured there for me and I've got some tension on it. Then I take my hook and I yarn over twice. Then I decide where I want to put that first stitch, and I'm just going to go right into the side there of that last stitch I made. Yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through that one and the loop that's sort of draped over my hand. There we are. And then I will take care of that when I weave in my ends, but I've got my first double crochet there. Again, if you'd prefer to join in a different way, you can absolutely do that. The important thing is just that we want to make sure that we work 2 double crochets in the side of each one of these double crochet stitches. So you've heard me talk a lot about sort of the block system that I use to make this pattern. And basically, each one of those blocks is 7 inches by 7 inches. And that 7-inch by 7-inch block is made up of 12-inch stitches across in 6 rows. So now we've got our 6 rows. We need 12 stitches across to start this next one. So everything you're going to be doing for this pattern is going to be, the stitch count will always be a multiple of 12. And you'll always have a total of 6 rows in that block, no matter how wide or long it is. So sometimes when we're working across like this, I just want to point out, it's really easy to get some funky spacing like this. So really you want to take your time and kind of find a place where you can work consistently into those double crochets. Like here, I worked them sort of in the top half and the bottom half. Here, I ended up way up top. So if you need to, go ahead and pull those off. You just want to make sure that they are spaced nicely along your double crochet stitches. But continue making 12 double crochets across here. And then, of course, when we would get to the end, you would turn and work rows 2 through 6, just like we did before. It's all just double crochets. So if we come back to the finished blanket, we'll take another look at how it comes together. So now, hopefully, you can see how this blanket comes together. Here, we've got that 24 stitches by 6 rows, very first rectangle that we make. And then here's section 2. It's only 12 stitches wide, but it's still 6 rows that we work right off the side there. Then we come down here. We can follow our diagram. We see 1, 2, 3, our next one. If I push that up here a little bit on our table, you can see 12 stitches worked across the end of this block here, 2 stitches in the side of each row, and then just work right on across that first block. Very easy, just 1 stitch in each stitch. Then if we come to our diagram, we see 1, 2, and 3. 4 is over here, so we come right here to 4. Let me push this up a little bit here. So then row 4, we've got 12 stitches across the end of block 3, and then 12 more stitches across the end of block 1. You can see right there, we're working across the ends of those blocks. So there's going to be 12 stitches on the end of each of those blocks. Then if we come back to our diagram, we can see block 5 right up here. And we have the same color here for block 5 and 8 because it's just the way it worked out with the amount of yarn. But this block starts right here and goes across the end of block 4, all the way across block 1, just again, 1 stitch in each stitch. And then we can see right there across the end of block 2. So again, 12 stitches right there, 2 in the side of each of those 6 rows. Then we move on to block 6, again, 6 stitches here, 12 stitches here, because there's 6 rows to work into. Then we work into each of these stitches, and then another 12 stitches in the sides of those rows. And again, we just continue all the way around, 6 rows per section, no matter how wide it is, and just work all the way across whatever you've made before. And that will give you the easy rectangle log cabin blanket. And that's how to crochet the easy rectangle log cabin blanket. Don't forget to go to the link in the description so you can get the written pattern and all the supplies you need. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.